by Mads Theater. And today I am thrilled, beyond thrilled, to have our guest in our studio, the lovely, the talented, the sparkling Jan
Levine.
Levine Thal. Not Leventhal and not Levinethal.
Correct. All of that is correct.
Which we also had an off-camera discussion about that. So thank you so much for coming today, Jan.
Thank you for inviting me. This is such a cool place.
Isn't it fun?
Plus, you have a friend for me.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I'm single, so.
Oh, there you go. Well, he's looking. So first of all, I want people to get to know who is Jan. What's the backstory of Jan?
So I was born if we start with when I was born, it will be a really long story. So where do you want to start?
Start with where you originally were from. Where are you from originally?
So I am the product of an academic family, and so I grew up in Champaign, Illinois, but we also traveled to Japan because my father was a scholar of Japan. And so when you say where are you from, it's complicated because I lived in a lot of places.
Sure.
He was also a visiting professor at MIT, so we lived in Boston for a while and so on. So I come from a lot of places, and not all of them anywhere near Wisconsin.
So how did you end up in Wisconsin then?
My father came here, and I cannot tell you what year it was, but I'm going to say in the 70s sometime. He was offered a job here and came to the University of Wisconsin, and but I was already grown. I was married. I had a child. But he talked to my husband at the time and said, if you're looking for the next step in your career, University of Wisconsin is really good in your field. And so we came back here for my husband to go to graduate school. And then he and I split up, although we're still quite friendly. And then he went to a different graduate school. So, he still went to the UW, but he went to a different field than the one that he started out in. So I was kind of here by accident at that point. But then I thought, I'll go back to school. And I went back to school. I went back to school in film at the University of Wisconsin. And I will just tell you this. There are many things about that program I cannot say on camera.
I think we know.
It was not a good fit. So I did get out of it with a master's degree, but I already had a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University. So I always say I have 2 masters and I'm the servant of neither.
So what brought you then into the theatrical world in theater in Madison?
When I first came back to Madison, my husband was lured here, but we came from a job I had in China editing a publication. And so when I first came back to Madison, I was looking for a job, and I found a job as a temporary job as an editor, and a book editor, that is, and which is relevant when we start talking about my play, which is about a book editor. And at that point, I said, well, here I am at one of the world's A-class universities. Maybe I should go back to school. And I went back to school in film. That was my big mistake. However, what was the question you asked me?
How you got involved in theater?
Oh, yeah. So for a while after I left film, I was just at 6s and 7s, and I had been a volunteer for a while at WRT, so I started to put a lot more time into that. But it wasn't as creative as I wanted to be. And one day I was having lunch. This is going to be a little name dropping with Kat Capillero, who is one of our local divas.
Love Kat.
And she's fantastic. Anyway, and I said, I have no creative life. What am I going to do? And she said, well, come with me and take this acting class I'm taking. And which was with Jody Reese, she does still teach, but she doesn't teach those classes anymore for the general public. And it was the most wonderful class, and it was so fabulous. And then things conspired so that I was divorced shortly after that, and things conspired so that I ended up living in New York City for 5 years. And I called Jody, my teacher, who I loved, and said, well, I know you studied in New York City. Who did you study with? And she said, Elizabeth Browning. Elizabeth Browning was on somebody's list as one of the top 10 acting teachers in New York. And I went, well, I'm not going to get into that class. she said, just call her, see what happens. So I called her, got her assistant, and her assistant said, well, Elizabeth's class are oversubscribed, but you can get on the waiting list. But if you're on the waiting list, you still have to take one of the classes. You have to audit a class to make sure it's a good fit. And I said, okay, well, I'll do that. So I signed up to audit a class, and there was a big to-do in that class that night. And one of the people quit in the middle of class. So I turned to Elizabeth and said, does this mean there's an opening in this class?
Yes.
And I totally leapfrogged over the whole waiting list and got into her class. And so I studied with her for almost 5 years, and it was enchanting and incredible and life-changing. And it gave me, I always loved the theater, but it gave me an appreciation for what makes theater both this wonderful, complicated art, but also such a collaborative art. And I think I didn't know until I started learning about theater that that's what I was looking for. I was looking for something where you are working with other artists, but you each have your own kind of domain. Mm-hmm. And that's what theater is. And it's been very gratifying. So I left the radio station and started volunteering with theater. I think the first thing I did was at Broome Street Theater, and my heart is still with Broome Street. I love that place. And then I also worked at the Bartell Theater, and mm-hmm. And I have actually done some work with some other theaters too, but those are the main ones. So that's most of the story.
So did you work in the theater when you were in New York taking the classes, or were you just taking the classes?
I was in one play where I don't even know how I got that part now, because I didn't audition for it. And I was supposed to have a British accent, which I really do not do accents well. But they kept saying, oh, it's fine. And I'm going, they really don't care about this play. And the rehearsals were hilarious. We were way downtown somewhere. I don't even remember where now. And there were two guys in it who would come from Brooklyn, and they were always at least an hour late to rehearsal. So the first hour of rehearsal was, pardon me, was us sitting around waiting for them to show up. And so I just got fed up, and I said, okay, I'm not working with that director again. I don't remember anything about the play. I know he wrote the play. I don't remember anything about the play or the director or even the theater, but I just was like, I'm not doing that again. And then I kind of got turned off to New York theater because it's so competitive. And I was already in my 50s, and my teacher was like, well, I don't really think you're going to do that well in auditions. And she's a wonderful person, and she's a really great teacher, but her analysis was that I was too timid. And I think that is true. I'm not the world's greatest actor. And it's about being timid. It's not about I can read text, I can create a character. But as far as doing things like auditions, it was not for me. But I came back here and I auditioned, and I volunteered doing this, that, and the other, and I found that my true calling is writing and directing. It's not, no. I feel kind of like that I'm almost like a joke, because what's that phrase? What I really want to do is direct. Here.
But you've done a lot of it, so it's not one of the things where you think, what you really want to do. You are doing that,
yes.
which is like bravo to you.
Yep. And I'm every play I do, I say, this is my last play. I'm never doing theater again. But I have two more on the horizon. So aside from the one I'm doing right now.
And I disagree with you, because I actually hired you as an actress.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
That's
I did.
True.
To be in one of the lovely versions of Sweet Canoe Eruption, where you were the lovely and talented Yetta.
I had so much fun on that show.
You were fabulous.
And
it was
that show.
improv. So you're talking about not being timid. You had to, sit at the tables and do improv for the show.
That was actually one of the greatest shows to do. And if anyone didn't see it, I'm sorry for you, because it was so much fun. Because you would go up to the table in character, and then you would just have a conversation with people. And people would be like, oh, there's somebody here in a costume. And they would be so happy to talk to you. So everything was positive. People were happy to talk to you. The story was always completely over the top and crazy, and they loved that. And often they were drinking, so they loved it more over the course of the evening. And also you paired me most of the time with Harvey.
Our wonderful Harvey.
And I loved Harvey. I'm sorry to say, for people who didn't know Harvey, that he has gone to the great theater in the
loved
sky.
Harvey.
But
And you were such a great team together too. It was of all the different people that Harvey had to be, coupled with over the years. You were my favorite team as the
Oh,
Sweets.
thank you.
You were my favorite sweet couple.
because the way it would go is that Harvey and I would go around to the tables, and he would just insult me, and I would, and I would be going, there, dear. It was hilarious because the old ball and chain. He was so much fun to work with, though.
And it was so fun for him because Harvey was such a sweet, nice guy. But then when you make the derogatory statements, they'd be like, "You're really a good actor, Harvey. I wouldn't believe that you were really putting people down."
He was so funny. Yeah, I really liked working with him. I have met his brother, who's a little bit like him. I met him through the Standardized Patients program, where a lot of actors
Yes, we are.
work there. I met his brother, and so it's nice because I'm kind of reminded of Harvey with some regularity because of his brother.
So, do you recall what was your first produced play in Madison? Do you recall
The first play that I wrote that was
Yes.
produced? Well, it was a short, or there was probably more than one short. The first one that I remember it was a short, was for a retirees organization. And I wrote this play in which young people were trying to get cards that said that they were older than they were so that they could get old people benefits. It was just a goofy idea, and that's the play I wrote. And of course, this conference full of people who were dealing with the elderly just thought it was hilarious, So that's the first thing I remember, and I don't even remember what year that was. But by the time that was produced, actually, I had done the Smart Woman Project, I guess. The Kathy Rasmussen Women's Theater did something. One of our very early productions was a series of shorts called the Smart Women Project. And I did not write many of them, but I might have written one, because I know that on that same docket there was somebody from the Smart Women Project. So.
And do you prefer directing your own pieces, or do you prefer directing other people? Do you have a preference?
It depends on the play. I prefer directing my own pieces because it is then a form of collaboration with the actors and the stage crew about how to make the play be what I meant it to be, instead of like. So in this the current play in Overprint, one of the young characters, used the expression "friend of Dorothy." So you know what it means. And what I hadn't thought about is friend of Dorothy, if you don't know what it means gay, it was code language between mostly men in maybe the 50s. It was a reference to Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale. So it was a reference to the Wizard of Oz. So I learned two things. One is that nobody under 40 knows that expression. I mean, nobody. I keep asking people.
Wow, that's sad.
And no, I actually think it's because we don't need code language anymore.
Well, that's very true. That's very true.
And so, but the other thing I found out is that friend of Dorothy to a lot of young people means as a reference to the Golden Girls, not to the Wizard of Oz.
I never thought of that. So it keeps its gay reference, obviously. Wow, that's funny. I never thought of that.
Was hilarious. So but the reason I brought that up is because that's an example of how I can rewrite my play on the spot. Somebody says, I don't know what that means.
Sure.
And you can say, okay, just say gay, and I can't do that. If it's a published play, you can't rewrite it. If you need to rewrite it, like you need to change it from Pittsburgh to Cleveland for some reason, you have to get permission from the publishing company. So in that sense, I like directing my own plays rather than having. If there were ever a second production of one of my plays, I would love somebody else to direct it, because now I have a script that I have confidence in. But the script gets developed in the rehearsal process. I like directing other people's plays when I like the play. Sometimes I've ended up directing things because I didn't want to say no. Somebody said, will you direct terrible, terrible, under terrible, terrible play? And I say, sure, because I always thought if I don't say yes, then no one's ever going to ask me again. And, you're as good as your last project, right? And so, that probably way better than I do. And so I just didn't ever feel like I could say no. So I directed a number of plays I loved. Most recently, I directed Escape from Happiness for Mercury Players, and I loved the play. I loved the cast. I loved everything about it. It was the greatest experience. But then at earlier times, I directed things where I went, "What the heck am I doing?" And so in the latter case, the former case, in Escape from Happiness, I loved directing it. I loved getting acquainted with this crazy Canadian writer who I wasn't very familiar with, and then if it's a terrible play, no, I never want to run. Then that's when I go, what can I do besides theater? I'm old now, so there's not that much I can, change to. Like, I can't suddenly take up flying.
Well, you could.
No.
If you don't want to.
No, I don't want to. Not math, not flying. Those are two things that are out.
So are any or all of your previous plays, are they published, and are they available to be produced? Or
Nothing.
Is it just through you? Is it you
just through me. Nothing is published. To get published by the big publishing companies, you have to have 3 productions. So somehow you have to go out and market your show until you have 3 productions. And then you have 3 productions, and then they'll consider publishing it. Now, I know there are other routes, and I don't know what they are to getting published. I think, if you're Tony Kushner, you just get published.
Well, yeah.
But I think he went through that other route first, and then he became famous, and now he can just get published. So I've only had 1 production of each of my shows. This is my 4th full-length play, and I've only had 1 production of each of them. I'm happy with all the productions. There are videos of them. If anyone wanted to produce another production, I'd be happily give them the rights, and we could discuss money and so on. But, and I could show them the video of the original production, so they kind of idea of what was done originally.
So tell me a little bit, if you can, about what's your process. Do you get an idea about a certain subject, or do you see something that goes, "Gee, I should write a play about that"? What's your muse for playwriting?
I would say that for every one of my plays, including the 5th one that's coming up, it was a completely different process, that each one was inspired in some different way. So the play that I'm doing now, Overprint, which went through about 75 different names before it became Overprint, was the first play I started to write. I started to write that like 20 years ago, and then I put it aside for many years, and I came back to it about, a year and a half ago. The other plays, the first play I had produced was a ghost story that was at Broome Street, and I'm sorry, is that right? I just have to think of whether that's the first one. Yeah. And that one was really me dealing with the death of my mother, right? And then the second one was, actually, they were produced out of order, because the second one that I produced was actually the second one I wrote, but it wasn't. It was the third. Whatever.
Math is hard, Jan.
I cannot do math, and I cannot fly. Those are 2 things that are out.
No, we've eliminated 2 things that Jan's
I am not flying.
She's not going to be in the theater.
And probably no pole dancing, I'm going to say. Although you have a pole here.
We have many poles.
But but there was one play that was sci-fi, and that came out of. I wrote a play for the 24-hour play. The Blitz. And the play that I wrote for the Blitz failed completely for reasons that had to do with which people were cast and how long they had to rehearse.
Well, that's a tough venue. That's a tough. You have to write it in one night, and then they have to rehearse it in couple of hours, and then boom, you have to perform it.
Well, and as you know, the thing that you learn as a writer, I've now written lots of those. I've written for the Blitz for years, but is that you have to make it really easy on the actors, because if you don't, they will not memorize it because they do not have time. Right. And so my later plays were much less complicated than this one, but this one was complicated. And then I said, well, part of the problem is it's really just a germ of an idea that should be a whole play. So that was my sci-fi play. And then the third one, I had wanted to write about relationships between the black community and Jews as a Jew, because I grew up in the civil rights movement, and in the civil rights movement that I was part of, it was most of the white people were Jews. It wasn't true that most of the white people in the overall civil rights movement was Jewish, but just where I was, it happened to be. So I wanted to write about that. I ended up writing about a couple where he was white and she was black. And one of the most gratifying things about that play was that a couple in which the woman was black and the man was white came to see the play, and they really validated us and told us that it was very much like their relationship. So
Wow.
I loved that. That made me so happy. So this is the next play afterwards, and this is about the world of book publishing. So I sort of knew about it, but since I came from academic publishing, it's a little different. I had to do a lot of research about commercial publishing to make it work. But still, it was the experience of being an editor is the experience of being an editor. And I don't think it matters what field you're in or what kind of thing you're editing. And so the main character is an editor, and that's what I was.
So you said you actually started writing this like 20 years ago?
Yeah.
So in all of its iterations, had you been changing it along the years, or did you just all of a sudden think, okay, now is the time to bring this up, and now I'm ready to get this thing actually on the boards?
I think I probably wrote it a jillion times. No, I would get it out every few years and go, this is a pretty good play, but there are problems with it. So I would futz with it, and then I would be like, oh, I hate this play. And then I would put it away. And then it had been put away for a while, and someone I'd been in a playwriting group with said, whatever happened to that publishing play? And I said, oh, I hate that play. And he said, well, I liked it, so I got it out again. And then I worked on it a while. And then at that point, I was working on something else, one of those other plays, and I just put it away. And then about a year and a half ago, I said, if I'm ever going to do that play, I just have to finish it. I have to finish writing it. And I'm very lucky to have a lot of people who read plays for me and give me really great suggestions. So that time around, I felt like I got to a final product that I could produce. And then, I have it now, and I'm still rewriting it. I'm sure the actors will tell you that I rewrote it. I finally said, okay, I'm not giving you any more of the the rewrites because they had to memorize it, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm still rewriting it.
Mm-hmm. So more than it being about editing, what's the characters and the plot of the play?
The play centers on a woman who is middle-aged, has a mother with dementia and kids in college, and is caring for both of them, both her kids and her mother, so all of them, and on an editor's salary, which unless you're a star editor, and there are some, but unless you're a star editor, editors make nothing. So she's trying to support them on this little salary. In the meantime, publishing, and this is one of the things that changed as I rewrote it, publishing in general of hard copy books is kind of in free fall. And especially novels, because people read them on Kindle and they read them on Audible. They don't buy so many hard copies. Yep. Plus, in general, the publishing industry went for the stars. So you can, if your name is, I can't think of a published play. See, I usually have these names just roll right off my. But so if you're a published novelist, and then you can.
Stephen King.
Stephen King's a perfect example. I usually use him as an example, actually. If you're Stephen King, you can just write whatever you want and you'll get published. Right. But there are many, I believe, many great novels out there that are sitting in someone's drawer. Mm-hmm. Or in this case, they're not in the drawer anymore. They're on the computer.
Right.
And so in my fictional world, there's this editor who's toiling away in a publishing company that publishes a lot of other kinds of stuff, like sports things and video games and whatever. But she's in a little division that publishes novels, and she is a brilliant reader and editor who has picked out these titles and then edited them into prize-winning novels. And there are certainly editors like that in the world. You'll see, if you read your favorite novel, you'll see in the acknowledgments that the editor is always acknowledged. And that's because usually the editor made a huge difference in how good the book is. And so that's my main character. And she was somewhat based on my experience, but I didn't edit novels. I edited academic work, so it was a different thing altogether. And then into this situation, so she's in this free fall industry, and into the situation come some other people who have other agendas, and there is romance and there is crime. And there's a really ugly bunch of flowers.
Oh my!
Somewhere in this last year and a half of working on it, I said, what I'd really like to do is have another medium. And I thought about using film, but I like live medium. And also because I thought there was a good chance I would end up doing it at Broome Street, I thought film at Broome Street could be difficult, it'd be hard to project it. Just they can project it. They actually have great technology, but I just thought it'd be problematic. So I, partly because of my own whatever, so I thought, okay, I want some sort of live multimedia thing, and I decided on dance. And I am friendly with a really fantastic choreographer, Heidi Hagseth, and so we talked about it a little bit. And so I ended up thinking it'd be very interesting to have this very talky, very wordsmith-based story where the commentary on it is not spoken. The commentary is dance. And so that's what I did. We'll see if it works. Right now it's like, to me, it's all perfect. I think they all look fabulous. And I have such good actors. But who knows? Who knows if what's going to happen? The audience may go to it and go, I don't understand. And if that happens, oh well.
As long as you make them think, they don't have to understand it. As long as they're entertained, and as long as it makes them think about it.
Yeah.
Not all plays are meant to be like, oh, that was the most fabulous, lighthearted, wonderful thing in the world.
Yeah.
Like, perfect example, not of a play, but we watched Oppenheimer finally. And there were things that, and that I grew up as a child with all that really happening.
Right.
But because of being a child, my perception of that was so different. And Jim and I ended up having this amazing discussion just about what was really going on and what was happening, and how the whole two worlds of science and then war and government, it was crazy. So even if you don't like it as it being the product of the film, you can have your idea about it, but it sparked an internal conversation. So I think in plays, that's kind of what plays are meant to do. They're supposed to spark conversation and imagination of something that you see presented live.
I agree with you, and that's my favorite kind of theater to go to is theater that makes me think that I'm not settled with at the end of the play, that I go home and think about some more. I have seen dozens of plays like that, not hundreds. I mean, I have seen hundreds of plays, but I've only seen dozens where I just thought about them for a week afterwards. And one of them was a play I saw in London, I was going to say this year, but it was last fall, which is called Dr. Semmelweis. And it is about the doctor who changed all of medicine by saying that doctors should wash their hands between patients.
Oh, right.
And he's called the hand-washing doctor. Apparently, people who studied medicine learn about him as the hand-washing doctor. And so that's what the play is about. And the play is very serious and very sad. And there are a lot of dead bodies in it because people are dying because they are dying of sepsis. And so what either the playwright or the director came up with was dancers. I felt so.
See?
I felt so up to date. I thought of dancers too. And so it's Dr. Semmelweis in the upstage, sometimes using the whole stage, but often just upstage hanging around, are these beautiful dancers who are in kind of raggedy clothing because they are the dead women who died because people didn't wash their hands, because the doctors didn't wash their hands. But they dance and they're present, and it was the West End, so it's expensive. They got the top notch everybody,
Sure.
top notch. Michael, what's his name? Rylance. He was the main. He was Dr. Semmelweis, and he was fantastic. But all the dancers were obviously the best of the dancers. And then the dancers would come on stage. I think there were 8 women dancers and a male dancer who was Death. And then there were 4 other women dressed just like the dancers who were the string quartet the dancers danced to. See, now that's where it's nice to have money.
No kidding. Yeah, that's always very true. Very,
it's like,
very, very
I'm
true.
in the West End and I'm going to this fancy theater and I'm going, and a fancy theater where they serve champagne. Like, I'm
There you
drinking
go.
champagne.
There you go.
And watching this just brilliant concept of how to represent all the people who suffered from the fact that the stupid medical profession was not listening to this guy. People didn't listen to him. Most of what we know that he changed happened after his death, and he died of sepsis. And so the play itself is a very sad, tragic story of him and his life, and him basically pounding at the door of the medical establishment saying, "Wash your damn hands." And
it's such a simple thing too. It's like, why would you say no to that? It's like, that's so crazy. Life. Wow.
And he even put together his own clinic where he not only had everybody wash hands between clients, but between patients, but he changed the sheets between patients. And he had a much, much, much lower mortality rate than any other clinic. And still, the medical establishment had other reasons. They explained it away some other way, and they did not give him credit. So if you just went to a play about that, you would probably be dragging around for a week going, I think I'm going to kill myself. Although that story of these brilliant innovators who the establishment won't listen to is a story we see a lot.
Right.
But having the dancers on stage, having these beautiful ballet dancers, and they are the dead women, but when you're seeing them, they're not lying around dead on stage, they're dancing. They're like, what they are is almost like the spirit of what those women could have been if they had lived. And it's so, I don't know, it's just, I thought about that play for a week. So,
wow.
Or maybe for a month and a half, because I'm still talking about it after all this time.
Well, it affected you in a great way, too, because now you have dancers in your show here.
Yeah, although that's not, I had already planned on dancers. So it was just happenstance that they thought of dancers and I thought of dancers, you know.
So speaking of your cast, who are some of the people that are in your cast?
Although, so that I do not screw up and say the names wrong,
And
I'm going to tell you
perfectly
the answer
fine
to
to have a cheat sheet.
I have a cheat sheet. So, Colleen Murphy will be playing the part of
Colleen.
I know, she's so fantastic. And so she's playing Meredith, the editor. And then in her office are Sarah Whalen.
Oh.
And
Sarah
Wytak. And so the older generation and the younger generation. And those are the three women. And the three men are Arco Bakshi, Brian Royston, and James Rowe. So these are good actors.
Yes, they are.
These are, and then we have a seventh actor on stage whose name is Heidi Weitz, who's just returning. She's in her 20s, but she's just returning to theater. She is a middle school teacher. And she's wonderful, but she did me a favor and plays all the utility parts like, will you be the office worker who comes in with the flowers? Will you be the person who's serving the coffee in Duke's place? There are two locations. There's Meredith's office, and then she works on the 10th floor of this big office building full of publications that are all under the same rubric. And then on the first floor of that is a jazz club that's called Duke's Place, after Duke Ellington. And also Duke Ellington happened to write a song called Duke's Place. And so she's also Heidi Weitz is also the server at Duke's Place. So she's been, the other six, I knew everybody but Arco beforehand, and Arco is just wonderful to work with, but they all are. These are pros. These are people who I would work with tomorrow again on something else like that. And then Heidi also, but I didn't know that until she started working on the show. And then the four dancers are, I have four dancers because I am not the West End. I do not have money for 8 dancers. I don't have money for 4 dancers. They're all doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And they are Laura Athas, Cynthia Bachhuber, Nicole Klaus. Nicole's going to kill me because I have mispronounced and misspelled her name so many times. Nicole Klaus, how hard could it be? But I screwed it up. And Pepper Williams. And all 4 of them, they're so beautiful to watch, and they've been such good sports about being in a play. You know, it's not a dance recital. And they're like, okay, fine. You want us to enter and act like we're guys? Okay, we'll do that.
So now, were these all from Heidi's classes?
We had auditions.
You had auditions, okay.
And she cast them from auditions, yeah. So, yeah, it was an exciting. It was really fun for me because I'd never been to a dance audition before, so I didn't have an opinion. I thought everybody looked great, but I watched the way Heidi worked with people to figure out what their capabilities were, and it was really fun. It was like, oh, I'd like to go to more dance auditions and just sit there like a fly on the wall.
So, how did you finally come up with Overprint? What was the little bell that went off in your head? That because you said we went through many different iterations, right?
I wanted something that was a reference to publishing and serious. And even though the play is a comedy, I wanted it to be a serious reference to publishing. And so I considered a whole lot of different publishing terms. For a while, it was called galley proofs. Galley proofs they don't have them anymore, but it used to be that you would get a galley proof of a book before they put it in final form. And part of the reason I didn't use that name is because I don't have them anymore. I was like, let's just label this something that's old-fashioned so nobody will come to it because it sounds like, and what overprint can mean is it can mean that you just have too many copies of something. But it also can mean that you print over text, and you can either do that by mistake because you printed it twice by accident, or you can do it as an artistic effect, or you can do it by accident and have an artistic effect. So it has a lot of meanings, and I feel like all those meanings were already there in the play. So I felt as if I had found the word I'd always been looking for. So it was exciting. Yeah, to call it Overprint. Also, Overprint's way easier to say than some of the crazy names.
No, and it's very catchy. And then you realize that when it's about publishing, you think, oh, what a great title for that. So it really makes sense that's the title for it.
I'm very lucky because the people who are the non-acting artists, like the lighting designer and so on, all kind of embrace this idea of overprint, so that the lighting designers come up with some ideas of lighting that are kind of reflective of the overprint concept. I'm working with Ron Collins that's Patricia Macetic, who's a genius. I love working with her. And then Ron Collins is doing some projections, and he also said, well, what if I film the dancers and then we project the dancers onto the dancers? So we haven't done the film yet, so we don't know how that's going to work. But I still love the idea of the overprint of the dancers on dancers. So. And
this is a collaboration between KR Women's Theater and Madison Theater Guild.
Madison Theater Guild it's produced by KR Theater, and then it's Madison Theater Guild is our kind of PTC home, PTC being the companies who are the participating companies of the Bartell Theater. So they have given us space to build our set, for example, and they've helped us with some other things. But KR's really been involved in the kind of day-to-day operations stuff. Somebody from the KR board is our social media person, for example. And I'm very grateful to them. I used to be the artistic director of KR, but I left because for two reasons. One is I feel like it's really easy to have founder syndrome, where you go, I founded this company and it's going to be the way I want it for the rest of my life and the rest of your life and anybody else whose lives happen to cross our paths. Well, the problem with that is that it gets stale, and also people don't like working with people who are rigid. That's not really theater, right? And I didn't really think I was getting that way, but before I got to be that way, I thought it'd be good to hand over the reins to a younger generation and to people who had different artistic vision from mine, still within the concept of women's theater. And so that was supposed to happen in 2020, that we did the Pass the Torch. And then we had the COVID. So we are going to do a little Pass the Torch ceremony after one of the overprint performances, so that I can literally pass the torch to Susan.
There you go.
But Susan Curry has taken over the company and is running it, and with Sarah Beth Honor, who's the associate artistic director.
Two fabulous people.
They are both, and they both have these great artistic visions, and they're different from mine, which is just so exciting. I mean, that's true of everyone I've worked with. They have somewhat different visions of what art is or what theater is or what makes a good play. And as a result, you get these things that happen that are so fantastic.
But that's the whole collaboration thing. That's what's wonderful. That's the basic core of theater. That's why, still love doing it. And if something project comes up and I think, gee, I think I want to do that again. Or like, I don't really want to do it just because I have to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's, I understand the whole thing of like, when you're the artistic director of a company, it's like, well, got to crank something out here and I got to come up with something new or got to do it, or let's bring out that old chestnut again and see how that goes.
Yeah. People kept saying to me, aren't you going to do Steel Magnolias? One, it was not, the mission of KR Theater is to do plays written and directed by women. Well, Steel Magnolia was written by a man, so no. And then there were some other old chestnuts that people said we thought we should do that were written by women. One of them being Harvey. Harvey's a wonderful play. I love it, but it doesn't really have an audience anymore. I mean, I've seen a few productions around here, even really good productions, and the audience was sparse. I don't think in our generations, since I'm a little older than you are. In our generations, I think Harvey was a classic, and we all knew the movie, and we all would go to see it because it was the humor of our youth, But it's not the humor of young people today.
True.
And so, I said no to Harvey, even though I love the play. And what else did we talk about doing? But so we mostly did new work. We mostly did work that someone we knew had written. There were a few exceptions. We did. We did a Vogel play, The Mineola Twins, which was such a great play. Actually, yeah, that was one of my favorite. Well, every play we did was one of my favorites. we did a play by Ellen McLaughlin called Helen, which I really love, which is about Helen of Troy, and so on. But almost all of them were slightly less well-known plays. And because I felt like, well, what's the point of doing plays that have been done to death? And also, I wanted to give new directors a chance on the stage. And the problem is that if you do an old chestnut directed by a new director, then it's really hard for them to make it their own. And it's really hard not to put up with the criticism that says, well, I saw it last year at, in Milwaukee, and it was way better. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, So, and I was very glad to work with people who were doing their first or second play. I felt like that was part of the mission of the women's theater, was to give new directors a chance to direct and new writers a chance to write, and so on. And some of that is really thanks to Broome Street Theater, because I was lucky to have worked with Joel a few times, Joel Gersman, before he died. And Joel's whole thing was basically open the doors, see who comes in, and let them be on stage. And Joel, what a character. But he had a lot of new people on stage all the time, and some still acting today, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later. After he died, Callan Hardy, who'd been one of the directors for Broome Street Theater for many years, put together a list of all the companies that were an offshoot of Broome Street Theater. And at that time, there were 30, and I bet there'd be more than that today. People who started out doing their theatrical work with Joel at the theater, and then went on to do to create their own companies or do work somewhere else, or, maybe even work in Hollywood or on Broadway or someplace. So, yeah, it was once I saw the map, because he put them all over a map, I was like, oh, wow, wouldn't it be great to have that kind of influence? And I don't know that Joel really knew that he had that kind of influence. I really don't know. I mean, I think Joel had a vision of what theater he wanted to do, and that's what he did.
Right.
And I don't think he cared that much about what his legacy was, except I could be wrong about that. I just don't know. But I feel like he was so true to his vision. There were two things I learned from him, really. One is being true to your vision, and the other is give people a chance. New people want to come forward. That theater, great people come out of little, what is it? Great oak trees from little acorns grow. So, yeah,
Right. Very true. So Overprint opens March 1st
Yes.
at the Bartell. Are you in the Eview or the Drury?
Eview at the downstairs theater. It's a black box theater, and we have only 50 seats plus space for people in wheelchairs. And so if you want to come to the theater, get your tickets now, because we have only 50 seats, because often in the Eview, people set up 70 seats and only 40 people come. So we thought it'd be better for everyone if it felt like it was full.
That's a great idea.
And if we get more than 50 people, we do have a way of setting up other chairs, but it'll be not as good places to sit. So get your tickets now.
And tickets are on sale at the Bartell?
Yes, on the
Bartell
Bartell website. And it's I recommend that people buy tickets in advance for anything at the Bartell, because it streamlines your process once you get there. But there are often walk-up tickets. And so I think the biggest pain in the neck of the Bartell is parking. So the one thing I would say, and there is a ramp catty corner from it, so there's usually parking on the ramp. But if you can't, give yourself a little extra time. Come downtown, have a meal,
right,
and then go to the Bartell, because everything else about the Bartell is very pleasant. It's almost everybody who works in the front of house is a volunteer, and I've had such good experience with the volunteers there. I feel as if people are so pleasant, and sometimes they'll say, "Give me a chance because I don't really understand this computer." So, oh well, that's the thing about having volunteers. But mostly everybody's pleasant, and as an audience member, it's a pleasant place to go. There are 2 theaters. I have worked in both theaters. I like the black box better. That's because I came out of Broome Street. I like experimental theater, I like weird theater, and I like the intimacy of black box.
And it's a great little space.
It is.
It really is. It
Wonderful
really
space,
is.
Yeah.
Really, really. Well, at both theaters, I've done shows in both places, but I always had a preference for the Eview, because you feel like you're part of you're involved in the play that you're down there.
But having said that, I know people say, "I will not come to your play if there's audience participation." Okay, it is intimate in the sense that you're close to the actors. There is no audience participation. You do not have to come up on stage and be hypnotized or anything. It just
That'll be your next play. That'll be Jan's next play.
Yes,
all audience participation. You will be hypnotized.
I read about a play in New York. I wish I could remember what company did this. It was some famous play, but I don't remember what it was, where the audience came in and everybody lay on cots, and then they turned the lights out, and all the play was done in the dark, and then sometimes the actors would touch you.
Oh my. Man, that's got to be a triggering experience if you're not ready for that.
I think everyone was told what it was going to be like before they got there, but still, there was a part of me that was dying to try it just to see what it was like. But there was a part of me that was going, I don't think I would like that. That's not theater. That's like a child's game, and I don't like that kind of children's game.
Wow. Well, that's like the people that do dinner in the dark.
Yeah.
You go out and you have this fabulous dinner, but all the lights are off, so you really can't see what you're being served. You can't see who's serving you.
Yeah, same idea. Yeah.
Wow.
It doesn't appeal to me. I
want to see my food.
It's the whole thing. It's in a sense the comparison with theater. It's like it's all the senses. Right? You see it, you smell it, you can, the different textures of the food, which you can see, also feel different. And I feel like with theater, which is different from, say, a movie, is that, first of all, the production you see, the performance you see, is the only one ever. That's that performance. There'll be a different one the next night. So that's amazing. And then there's the sense that you're seeing everything. You're seeing the characters, and you're seeing the actors. You're seeing the floor of the theater, and the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. Yeah.
Love it. Wonderful. Jan, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule for being with her today.
Thank you.
Go and see Overprint, because I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic show at the Bartell.
I hope so.
Yeah, we know so.
We'll find out. We'll all find out together.
We'll all find out March 1st. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us again today. We'll see you next time on Biz Buzz with Bruno. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
See you next time.